in the last couple of years here at Oxford, we've been talking a lot about migration. This is because of two research projects that we run here. And we've been screening some films, we've been seeing some of the milestones, if you like, in terms of Italian cinema linked to this topic, from Amelio's L'America to much more recent ones such as Mohsen Melliti's Io l'altro and Segre's Io sono lì. Now, with Haider's It's About to Rain, we're kind of moving on to a different stage, to a new stage. This is the first film by a director whose parents experienced migration. Haider's father came from Iraq in 1978, but who themselves were born and bred in Italy. And this will hopefully bring new kind of energies and ideas to Italian cinema, similarly to what it did in Great Britain as much as in France, countries that experienced migration, if you like, before, a couple of decades and more before Italy. So that there's a sense that Italian cinema might be moving, and this is a new stream of ideas coming to enrich Italian cinema. Now, one word of introduction about Haider and his work is this is not his first film, but first his biography. Born and bred in Florence. If you were to talk Italian to you, you will immediately tell that's the town he comes from. And he went through the kind of education that any Italian school kid would go through. As I said, an Iraqi father, the mother is Italian though, although Calabrese, so it's kind of a case of internal migration in this case. But like many young Italians, and I've thought probably a good number of you around here today, at some stage he decided to go abroad and follow his passions. In this case, it was cinema, so he came to London to study cinema. And this is not his first film, it's actually the third one. There's other two feature films. The first one called Tangled Up in Blue, which came out in 2009. And it's a film which again deals, it's set in London, but it's about a young man who deals with emotional legacy of the father, an Iraqi author who had been assassinated in Baghdad. Then more recently we have a documentary, very most interesting documentary about music improvisations, in which musicians coming from different backgrounds, ethnical, classical and jazz, and Tom Donald is one of them here tonight. They kind of produce a new kind of multicultural performance. So this is the background now. Stop at Piovere, here we are. So let's start. I'll start with a couple of questions, and then hopefully you'll butt in too. And let's start from the roots in a way. I'd like to talk about the roots, both cinematic and, if like, more personal, biographical ones. Okay, the cinematic one first. In the film we've seen Pontecorvo's The Battle of Algiers being mentioned and actually quoted in. So this is a question about the kind of roots that somehow are behind this film, not necessarily related to migration, but migration, in Pontecorvo's film is not about migration, but at the same time, I'm curious to know whether somehow your experience as a young filmmaker was somehow shaped by films and what kind of films?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity and honor. Yes, Pontecorvo and that film especially had a major influence on me because I saw it as a kid, I think in elementary school. And because my background, my family, my father was a political activist back in Baghdad, so I was brought up on very strong values against rights that were taken away from people. And when I saw the Battle of Algiers as a kid, it just shocked me, and it really changed something. But that was before I wanted to make movies. So later on, I started watching the work of directors like John Cassavetes, who really changed my life completely, and shaped in a completely different manner the way I would think about cinema.
My brother, he's a kind of second generation.
He is, yeah. He's
director,
Greek,
yeah.
and he was his father was Greek, and his mother was American, born and bred in New York, and he never really touched on subjects of migration, but he was an outcast in the film world. He's considered the father of independent cinema in the States, and of course he drew a lot of inspiration from the Nouvelle Vague from France and from neorealism. So he's really the director who affected me the most. But then again, neorealism, De Sica, Rossellini, and later Antonioni, whom I also love very much. And from each of these, I think I took something. And it's a bit painful that nowadays it's a bit harder to find directors who inspire me as much as these masters.
And so moving on to the personal biographical side. I mean, as you said, Cassavetes didn't make film about migration, and you don't have to.
Sure.
But at the same time, it is central in this film, and it is somehow a recurrent theme in your previous films. It's all about it's a lot about identity and moving, between different countries,
Yep.
and so. But here we have an Algerian family. Your background, cultural background from your father's side is Iraqi. So I'm just wondering, but the first film was about Iraq. I'm just wondering about you yourself. To what extent having this kind of double identity has it shaped the way you related to people and now to your profession?
Well, it's something that came up around my early 20s. When I moved to London, I suddenly realized what my parents had gone through, especially my father. As you said, he left in '78 from Iraq, he went back 2 years ago for the first time after a long time. When I moved to London, I suddenly understood what it meant to be in exile, even if my exile was voluntary. I understood what it meant to be far away from home, and how the notion of home shifts and changes depending on a lot of things. So it sort of became apparent that there was a very, very big doubt in myself, which I hadn't really thought of before. And it sort of, as you said, shaped my work, because even in the music documentary, it talks about different cultures mixing and creating something different. Now with It's About to Rain, what we're tackling on the surface is, of course, the issues of citizenship that second generations have in Italy, but there's an identity crisis of this character, who suddenly is faced with a reality that he never considered. Now, for myself, it's sort of becoming, in a way, an obsession to try and understand where I'm from. Also because thanks to my work, I've traveled more and spent more time in Arabic countries. I've become, in a way, sort of known in the film circles in Iraq and in the Gulf countries. So suddenly, although I was born and raised in Italy, and that's Europe is my culture, suddenly I feel, well, maybe there's a side of me that belongs somewhere else, and I feel a calling, and I think a lot of people go through this phase in their lives. So I'm trying to express it through my work.
Okay, one last question before I open up the discussion. We notice it here, but again, recurrent. You tend to have to be a pretty hands-on director. You write it, you write your film, you shoot it, you edit it, and produce it as well.
Yep.
So, in a way, the question is there about to what extent you feel that is kind of important and central to a filmmaker, to be part of every single part of the process. But I would like to open up also the discussion to the actual dimension in which you had to share your work, and that is the one that involves Tom, since on the musical side. And this is a very interesting side, because when it comes to the music score, again, different directors can have very different relationships with musicians, probably also according to the kind of expertise and interest they have in music. So I'm really interested to know the kind of modus laborandi with which you and Tom got together, and then it'd be interesting to hear from Tom about the way he thought about turning this film, in this script, into music.
Well, yeah, I am very hands-on. It comes from a need, which is, sometimes you write a script and you can't find a producer, so you end up producing it yourself, and then, you end up editing it yourself and maybe mixing the sound. And, through the years, I sort of learned to do a lot of things so that I could be less reliant on others, which in a way is a very powerful thing to have, but it's also a trap because you end up not trusting other collaborators. But I've edited all my films, produced all of them, directed and written all of them. So it's very personal in a way, but it's not something I would necessarily advise anyone else to do because it gets very stressful. Now, as far as Tom is concerned, I was lucky enough to meet him as I was finishing my first film, Tangled Up in Blue, by chance, pretty much. And I immediately felt he had the sort of abilities and talent and flair to be able to get into my way of working. So he scored that film, and then we did the documentary together, where we basically brought him to Sicily to play with some Sicilian musicians he'd never met, and they created a beautiful music. And then here, although he'd known about the project for some time, I literally just threw the film at him and told him we have a month to So he hated me at first, and in a matter of weeks, literally, he came up with what I think is a beautiful score, which is very, very related to the film because it comes also from different, genres and cultures, and you can hear some Arabic music, and then it becomes something else, and then so. He really has a lot of, even more of my respect for being able to pull it off. But my work with him is very instinctual. So he would throw something at me, and then I would just, maybe say a few words which wouldn't really make sense to anybody else, and he would change things or readapt. So we sort of got to a level of communication that is beyond words, and he manages to understand what I'm looking for.
Yeah, perhaps we can hear from Tom. Yeah, just tell us how. Yeah, so you received in your face this script, or was it already filmed?
Well, it was filmed. Yes.
Yeah. So, and then you had a month. So how did it go?
Yeah, I think Haider summed it up really well, actually. But I think one thing that we've always done with our approach, and from the beginning when we worked on Tangled Up in Blue, our approach has always been very organic, not so conventional in the sense that when you usually compose for film, there might be a scene that has to be cut and the composer will come up with 3 minutes and 33 seconds or something like that, and that's the music, there's no argument. We tend to bounce ideas off each other, and whilst there will be some sort of scene structure, the themes of the film, in a way, this film almost reminded me of Italian opera in a way, because there were themes for different characters, and it evolved as a structure. And in a way, when I see the way the work and the music has been mixed, quite often when I see Haider's films, I may have composed a motive of music that was supposed to go somewhere else, and all of a sudden I see it in a completely different spot, and of course it works beautifully. It's not what I expect. And in a way, Haider is taking, he's talking about how he tends to do as much as possible. He's even taking somewhat the role of a composer by getting my work and putting it in places where I'd composed for different scenes, which is very interesting. I think some composers probably wouldn't approve of this method,
A lot.
but I guess I'm open-minded. And when there's only a month, you don't really have much choice. Decisions have to be made very fast.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Okay, shall we open up the discussion to any questions that might come from you? I've got my own reserve one ready, so feel free to. Okay, well, I'll carry on while you decide. Casting. I'm sure you've been asked this question 100 times because you've seen the main part is played by an Italian actor.
Mhm.
And so I'm interested in a way in the casting of the whole family. But again, can you take us through how you decided to choose Baglioni and again the other parts?
I was actually looking for a second generation to play the role because that felt like the right thing. But in the back of my mind, there was always the doubt that maybe it would have made more sense to even make a stronger point about how Italian this character is to cast an Italian. And I've known Lorenzo for a few years actually, and I just knew him on a casual basis, and I knew that he'd been doing some musical theater and I don't know what else. But I never really considered him anything of value. And then he popped up in my mind, and I actually showed my father some pictures to say, do you think he could be Algerian? And he said, yeah, why not? So I called him. And he came in to read, and the first reading he did was pretty bad, and then the second was better, and he sort of, he made it through the whole selection process. But to be honest, it wasn't until the third or fourth day we were shooting that I realized that he could pull it off, because until we actually got into it, I just had a hunch that he could make it, but there was no certainty. And also with him, it became a very instinctual way of working. There was a lot of just contrast, and he would come and talk for 15 minutes about his character, and this is how it should be, and I would just say no, and he would get even more mad, and I would hit him sometimes. It was just, that kind of very like a father-son relationship, even though we're the same age. Now, with regards to the other actors, the father, the guy who plays the father is not an actor. He's never been on stage, never been in front of a camera. He's an architect that through some friends and people we found. And as soon as I met him, we were in a cafe. The way he was talking, I just saw in his eyes that there was an energy. And he, in a way, also reminded me of my father, the way he was talking about his life and his exile. We had a reading with him, but I was sort of set. Amir, the brother, is someone I've known since I was a kid, actually. And I hadn't seen him in 20 years. And then someone told me he wants to be an actor, so I said, let's try. While Julia is actually a professional actress, and she came in to read, and she did a great casting, and we loved her. But a lot of the actors that you saw in the film are not actually actors. All the workers and just people that we took. Some of them are family friends, some of them are just people who came in. A lot of who else? The guy who works in the immigration office, he actually works in that office. So we sort of tried to keep, even though maybe sometimes it feels like there's a disconnection between the actors and some of the original characters, but it sort of gives that realism that I think was necessary for this film, because we're dealing with immigration and with second generations in a very new way for Italy. We're talking about an immigrant or a foreigner as a normal person, and that is something that's very unusual in Italy. At least from what I've seen, foreigner is also always put in a little box, whether it's a magical character or a criminal or something else. But this idea of normality is something that has rarely been seen. So it was important for me to, break the barrier also of realism and, to make it look as much as a documentary as possible.
Thank you. Did you like the person who did the part of the TV presenter?
I didn't.
As you probably noticed, there was Haider.
It was very painful.
No, I thought it was good.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't like it.
No, so you played a little cameo appearance. Okay, yeah, there is a question there, so here comes the microphone. It's a long way. We only have one microphone. So.
Okay, I wanted to ask about the topic that I think is the main issue in the movie. It's identity in Italy for people who are sons of immigrants, can have different backgrounds. And I wanted to ask you, because you definitely know more about the subject, how are perceptions in Italy changing about the idea that people from these different backgrounds or from different ethnicities can be Italian? We see it, for example, in the national team a lot. We have Balotelli in Milan, we have El Shaarawy, and they're both from different backgrounds. And do you think the Italian people are evolving in the sense of accepting that these people from different backgrounds can be Italian? And how is this dynamics of this process, this change? How is it occurring?
Balotelli and El Shaarawy are helping in a way, because they suddenly you're talking about the most basic element of Italian culture, which is football, and suddenly there's a black guy who is the hero, and then there's an Egyptian guy who's the hero, and they're Italian and they're wearing an Italian shirt, and it's strange for people to sort of see that happening, and it's not what's going to make a difference, but it's helping in that process. And it's not, when you're talking about second generations now, you're not talking about strange creatures as it could have been maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago. People are starting to realize that the landscape is changing in Italy. And that's a very important thing because, as it was mentioned before, in a way, second generations can make a very big contribution to an evolution of Italian culture, whether it's literature, whether it's politics, whether it's film, because it's a new blood that we need. It's a new life. We need new stories. We need a different way. Italy is a country that's been stuck in many areas for many decades, especially culturally. But there's still a very, very strong element of xenophobia in Italy. There's still a very strong element of being unable to accept that someone who has a strange name like myself, or someone whose skin has a different color, can be Italian. I've been very lucky. I've never suffered racism. But until a few years ago, when I used to cross the border back into Italy and they saw my name in the passport, it took a while. They looked more, they asked more questions, and I used to get upset. But what can you do? You just have to keep your mouth shut. Now we have, we have 2 members of parliament which second generations. if they ever get in parliament, if we ever get a parliament. There was a big campaign for the citizenship, and it will happen because it's just part of the process of evolution. But for example, a couple of years ago there was a campaign called L'Italia sono anch'io, which means I'm Italy too. I'm part of Italy too. And there were two lists that you could sign. One was for citizenship, one was for the right to vote, which should come together, but for some reason they didn't. Now, everybody signed the one about citizenship. Some people were a little more hesitant on the one to vote, which I think says a lot about still the mentality that we have in our country. So, okay, we'll give you what you want, but when it comes to actually deciding what happens in the country, we're not so sure we want it. And I think as we're making these films and there's been books and other things being written, slowly what we should be trying to do is write some rules for how we should be talking about immigrants, how they should be portrayed, or at least create something, a study group on the academic level that really goes into the culture of the Italian culture also on an institutional level, so that we can actually help kids who are growing up now not to make the same mistakes about perception that maybe some of their parents have made. So.
And yeah, in terms of what you said about the people coming to accept that someone from a different background can be Italian, I understand what you said. I get the same reaction often. Sometimes people, I start speaking Italian, people look at me and oh, okay, and they find it funny. But I wanted to touch on something you said, because I was reading the other day an article, and apparently I was reading about this mother who has a child who her father is African, and so she decided to set up a group with other parents in Italy. I don't remember which city, I think Rome maybe, with other parents who have children who are black.
Mm-hmm.
And they set up a group where these parents get together and maybe they share some experiences. And the reason she said she did that was because she felt that the schools were unable to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads to my second question is, in the school, but generally the state, how do you think it's dealing with the question? Is it dealing appropriately? Is it dealing with it at all? What could be done, maybe?
I don't think it's dealing with it yet. I think there are some amazing teachers who are trying. I went to a school in Florence, which was an experimental school, which experimented a lot on the academic level, but also on the way it dealt with relationships between students of different cultures. They really tried to integrate. But it's a very unique approach in Italy. There's very few schools that do that. As I said before, there needs to be something happening on the academic level and the political level in order to make sure that the word integration is not just tossed around as it is now, but is actually put into place. And school is the best place to do that. I don't think it's happening yet. I think there's a few bits and pieces, and as well, I come from a city that's very, peculiar in Italy, because Florence is a little universe in itself. So if you go maybe to Rome, or you go to Naples, or you go to Milan, the situation, or in smaller towns, the situation is very different. But I think it will get there. There's a very, very strong sign that it's getting there. There are organizations of second generations that are really campaigning hard. They're lobbying as well, because at the end of the day, that's what needs to be done. And there's so many immigrants in Italy. It's 5-6 million now, so it's not a number that can just be ignored. And second generations are coming, and you can't stop that from happening. And if you don't give them the rights, they will take them somehow. So I don't know if I answered, but yeah, it's the most basic thing, school, I think.
I mean, to add a figure, I mean, this is a kind of demographic revolution, if you think that. Already, still in the early 1990s, Italy had a number of immigrants that were well below the European average, and now, as Adam was saying, we're literally approaching 10% of the population, which means that in certain cities where there is more a concentration, which of about 20-30%, so it's a huge demographic revolution that, I mean, Italians are very good at waking up at things kind of when it's already happened,
Yes.
like the general elections last week. All of a sudden we realized that 25% of the Italian population had enough with political traditional political parties. Now, possibly in a few years, we'll realize that Italy has become a multicultural nation, whether we like it or not. Okay, end of little lecture. Any other questions? Yeah, there's two.
I find it very difficult to understand why the two children are born in Florence, yet they don't have a birth certificate and they are not nationals. How can this happen?
Well, what the law on citizenship says, although there's been some changes, that basically you can become, if you're born in Italy from foreign parents, you can become a citizen when you get to the age of 18, and you have a year to ask for your citizenship. In order to become a citizen, you need to prove that you've lived continuously for 18 years in the country. Now, that should be done through your birth certificate, but as well registration at the, I don't know how it's called, anagrafe.
I understand.
Okay. Sorry. So if you can't prove that you've lived for all your life until the age of 18 in Italy, you're basically not given a citizenship. Now they've done a few decrees afterwards, as is often the case in Italy, where we fix laws year after year, where you can now prove through medical certificates or other types of documents. But the problem is not even with the law itself, the problem is with the whole system, the whole judiciary system, because each law, especially when it comes to immigration, is interpreted by every different office. So every different office can have a different interpretation, every different judge can have a different interpretation. And as a personal note, this is what happened to my father actually, because my father was denied citizenship because he was considered dangerous for the safety of the state. And he's not a very violent person, nor dangerous, but some little person in some little office decided to play with someone else's life and said, no, this guy is just dangerous. So that's what the problem is. The law is not written well, and then this badly written law is badly interpreted by a lot of people. And then you have, lives that get destroyed, families that get destroyed. So, yeah. Thank you.
Oh, yes. I was interested, you used a lot of close-ups.
Sorry?
You used a lot of close-ups
Yeah.
in the film, and also a lot of split scenes.
Yep.
Why? Could you talk a little bit about that as a medium for filmmaking?
Okay. I'm sort of obsessed by close-ups, and that's Cassavetes' influence actually. Because I work a lot with actors, I find it very fascinating for me to try and explore, especially their eyes and what happens there. So when I compose the shots of a scene, it's very easy for me to get into close-ups and a bit harder to do masters and wide shots. I don't I find it hard to relate to wider shots. And because most of these scenes are very intimate and personal, I tend to stay and to try to explore as much as I can these characters. But it does, sometimes it gets a little too much because it becomes a little claustrophobic. But in a way, that's also what we're trying, especially in a story like this, we're trying to really play with the audience's perception of the story. The split scenes, well, it's not all of these split scenes were actually in the script. Some of them were just normal scenes that, for rhythmical reasons, we decided to put together. But in a way, there was so much material in this film, and so many stories and so many layers in this film, that when I got to the editing, I realized that I could play not only with the story, but also with the contrast that happens. So as you see in the fight scene, for example, you have the anthem being sung with great passion, with the flag on his face, and then you have someone else killing himself because the country perhaps has strangled him, and then at the same time you have them in front of a policeman. So it sort of creates the confusion of the character's situation. So I think it's a device that I'm still exploring, but it's something that I enjoy very much.
I was, first of all, I'm ashamed to be Italian every time I see these kind of things, and it's really bad, and it touches inside, and you touch it. So I was curious about the masculine nature of this movie. Mm-hmm. I noticed that the journalist was a man, the judge was a man, the lawyer was a man, the immigration officer, two boys, and the fathers, and the only woman was the Julia. Mm-hmm. There. So I was interested to know why the mother wasn't there, and although she was mentioned, she wasn't. I mean, I know that she was there, sure, as you said many times.
It's interesting because I never really thought of this. Well, the story with the mother is that she's passed on. She was in the script. She didn't end up in the film, and this is I'm a bit ashamed to say that, but because we couldn't find anyone who could do that part. So I shouldn't be saying this, but so we reworked the story, but in a way, it sort of contributed, I think, to the dynamic that I was trying to create in the family, because you have three men, two of which are very strongly connected, and it's Said and his father, and the other one is just sort of, you never really know where he's standing. So it could have happened as well with the mother, but it sort of justified in a way the behavior of Said's brother as a bit of a rebel, as someone who's maybe suffered from the passing of his mother. So, because what we were trying to do really between these two brothers is to have Said as the hero and someone who's much more morally strong than his brother. And it's true that the only character is Julia. There were other female characters that were cut, but they were very minor roles. I guess, I don't know, because I'm a man, I tend to Right, I'm not sure. Or maybe I'm frightened of women, I don't know. You know, I've been through a lot of heartbreaks, so maybe it's my revenge.
It's okay, it's okay.
Yes. I don't know if there was another part to your... Okay.
I think there was another question. You wanted to add, Rosalba? Yeah.
So it's just a very quick question about the future of the movie, because obviously you want to get your message across
Sure.
the wide audience, and especially in Italy. So could you tell us more about where it is going to be shown, and whether it's going to be shown extensively in Italy?
Well, I thank you for this question because I'm very proud of this. That we're actually getting the film into theaters nationwide on May 2nd. So we'll start with a very limited release. It's going to be about 10 screens in 5 cities. But it's going to be Rome, Florence, Milan, Naples, so the big cities. And we're hoping to expand after that. We have the whole, in Italy usually it's better to have a film come out, in the winter because people like to go to the theater, and in the summer they like to go to the beach, but there's more space for independent films in this period of time. So May is kind of a good compromise for us. And we're trying to, make ourselves heard as much as possible. There's a chance that, again, if we do get a parliament, it will be screened at the parliament once the law on citizenship is presented. And we've been discussing that for a few months now. So the film is getting quite a lot of attention, and with very, very minimal support because we're an independent company. And we got already a lot of press coverage and TVs have spoken about it. So hopefully now with the release we will be able to get it to more people, and if it gets into the debate on the law on citizenship, we made it now because this is when it had to be made, so hopefully we'll go on. And it's going to a few festivals as well, Sydney Film Festival and a few others in the next few months.
Okay, perhaps we can just stop on a very last question, which takes us back to the title. I've been wondering, in the film there is a moment in which Stamper Piovere is about to rain, but obviously I'm thinking about the kind of the symbolism that you might have in mind.
It's actually a title I've had for about 10 years that I wanted to use. And it was related to another story, but in a way another story that had some narrative connection to this one. It's a title that gives you a feeling of imminence, of something that's about to change, that's about to happen. And I think this is what we're experiencing now in Italy. Whether it's about immigration or second generations or a cultural change that is happening. And it's also in a way in a very mild manner, a warning for those who don't believe this change should be happening, because whether or not you like it, it will change and it will happen and it will rain. So that's it.
Thank you. Today's Oxford was the perfect setting for
Yes.
that title. Per piovere di nuovo. Okay, so thanks very much, Haider. Thanks to Tom as well for contributing to the conversation. So please just help me give both of them a warm thank you.
Thank you.